Okay. Well, I can't see you, but you can see me. All right.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So hello, Robert Berend here once again. And so I'm going to do a summary that'll take me as long as it will take me for a brief summary, because this is day one of an 8-week course on the blues. And let me just start talking about the blues, but I'll start here. When I was about 8 years old, I got my first clock radio. My parents put a clock radio in my bedroom, and I turned on KFWB in Los Angeles, and B. Mitchell Reed was the DJ. And this is indeed the first song I heard on my radio in '64. Okay, so this song was written by John D. Loudermilk, who was a white guy, and countless people have done this song, Tobacco Road. But this is what I heard, and I won't say that it's what led me to my interest in the blues, because at this point in '64, the Yardbirds had been around for a year in England. The Beatles came on to many things, but that was later. They came on to Ed Sullivan in '64, and I just I've been listening to the radio and been hugely into music since then. But let's start earlier in the days. So the book that we're using for the class primarily is this, The Devil's Music by Giles Oakley, who did a BBC documentary on the blues, probably back in the '80s. So his book is really good. So blues starts with slavery, back when merchants from around the world were going into Africa, to different countries in Africa, and bringing slaves in and importing them into America and plenty of other countries. And I'm sure we all learned in school about how the voyage was horrible, and people didn't, the slaves didn't speak the same languages. They were crowded together in miserable conditions, and then sold to work on the farms across, the colonies and the South. And not having common languages, there was singing, there was music. Music was forbidden by the slave owners, because they didn't understand what was being said or communicated, and they're worried about uprisings. So there was no singing, but there was some stuff evolved, like call and response, working on the railroad and picking cotton, singing and hollers back and forth to keep the pace and a rhythm going while people were doing their work. So slavery, as we all know, was miserable, racism, and if you were an escaped slave, you could be shot, or there was a bounty. And some psychologists figured out that if slaves were escaping, they had a psychological problem, because they were leaving the happy environment and running away. So clearly there was a psychological problem. They were running from slavery. So Civil War ended in 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation, and but there was really no place to go, and no money, because you didn't have any money as a slave. So there was sharecropping, and basically, if you were Black, you were still getting the raw end of the deal, because you were being charged for seed, and whoever owned the land said, "Oh, you're going to get, half a penny per ton of goods," and so nobody made it out of poverty. In 1902 was the first recording of a Black musician, and this is called the Camp Meeting Shouts. And as 1902 progressed, sheet music was really popular, because a fair number of people had pianos and could play instruments, so sheet music became a big popular business. There was a musician and composer named W.C. Handy. In 1903, Handy is in a train station, and he hears a nameless guy playing guitar, using a knife. I'd imagine using the knife as a slide on the guitar, like this, on the neck of the guitar. And he hears the guy sing about where the Southern Cross is the dog, and all that, which is 2 train lines in the South. And he hears this music, which is unlike anything he'd heard before. So he releases a song called Memphis Blues, but it is not a blues song. And in the 1910s, there were plenty of songs that had being released that had the word blues in the title, but they weren't blues as we know them. They were more ragtime, Scott Joplin-y kinds of things, but they just had the word blues in them. In 1920, in fact, on Valentine's Day of 1920, Mamie Smith is a Black female recording artist, and she's recording the first blues LP called Crazy Blues. This is known historically as the first blues album recorded by her and her band. In the 1920s, women blues performers were much more popular than men performers because they were more polished. They were more in the area of like jazz or a big band didn't exist yet, but they had a band behind them with piano and clarinet and instruments like that and guitar. So Mamie Smith's LP was recorded Valentine's Day, 1920, Crazy Blues. These songs were known as race records, and in some of the readings, say that race records was discriminatory and racist, but from other readings I've done, it wasn't really that. There were some newspapers focused on the African-American market, and they referred to them, the use of race, like this person's a credit to their race, or we must stand strong for our race. The use of race, from what I read, conflict, but there we go, it was not pejorative. So when these albums were released, or the singles, and they were called race records, it was not an offensive term. In the 1920s, Charlie Patton, who was a cotton field hand on the Dockery Plantation, which is a famous plantation in Mississippi, he became pretty much the first Mississippi Delta famous blues musician. As a teen, Howlin' Wolf heard him. So my notes I wrote, Teen Wolf. So Wolf saw him as a teen. As the 20s progressed, so the women bands were happening. Blacks were trying to leave the Mississippi Delta, whether they were going to New Orleans or to St. Louis or Chicago or California or Texas. They were doing their best to leave what historically they'd been going through in the South. So there were tent shows, there were revivals, and I know it being a sensitive time and topic, there was a word I'm not going to use, but these were the minstrel shows. There were singers like Ma Rainey. There was a type of performance in these early days also of the 1900s called a cakewalk. And the cakewalk was the black parody of formal white dancing. If you can imagine, dancing to minuets and waltzes as an upper class white, the blacks and the field hands were parodying this fancy, elaborate, ornate dance because they weren't really letting their hair down. So these were called a cakewalk, and there were parties and events and formal things called cakewalks where the winner, and these were the black workers, the winners would be chosen by some committee of the elite whites, and they would win a cake, for doing the best performance. So ragtime was happening. There was still plenty of segregation in the theaters. There was vaudeville. So vaudeville comes from the French words voix de ville, which means voice of the city. So I only found that out a couple of years ago. I think I was reading a book on pre-code films or something, but I find it fascinating because we've all heard of vaudeville, but I don't know if any of us know that means voix de ville, voice of the city. I think that's really cool. So there was large ornate theaters in the 1920s W.C. Fields, was playing in vaudeville, and comedians and slapstick humor and formal singing. And I don't know if you would say that Enrico Caruso, the opera singer, played in vaudeville, but these were the giant ornate movie palace theaters of the 1910s and 20s with Lowe's and Fox and other, there were also some regional places that put out the money for these ornate movie palaces, which is a whole class unto itself about those things. There was another famous woman singer named Bessie Smith, and Ethel Waters. Ethel Waters, Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith were some of the top women performers with bands behind them. And in my reading in The Devil's Music about Ethel Waters, some of you know her name or read about her. Her mother was raped at 12 years old. And when she was touring in Lexington, Kentucky, she had to sleep in a stable because no place in Lexington, Kentucky would let the woman who sold out the theater sleep in a hotel, apparently. and this kind of stuff just breaks my heart, but we all know the signs that say, you know, whites only and all that. And it's just heartbreaking, you know, and the racism stuff continued. And while I'm having the random thought, when the Beatles were going to play, I think it was Florida, the crowds were going to be segregated. I think it was 65 or so when the Beatles were going to play Florida, but certainly 64, 65, 66. And they told management, we're not playing in Florida if you're not letting everybody in and sitting in an integrated way. We're just not playing. And so with that, the Beatles helped break the color barrier. About a year ago, I also taught a course on Jimi Hendrix, and the issue, so skip the Hendrix thought, but American Bandstand. So my research a year ago on other musical stuff, because I love music, on American Bandstand with Dick Clark that was started in the 1950s in Philly. And if you look at the Wikipedia article on American Bandstand, you'll find lots of information. They would not let Black kids in to dance on American Bandstand. And so the Black teenagers were there ready to go dance, but both when American Bandstand was just a local Philly program, and then when it went national, they would not allow Black kids to dance. They would be there in line and they would wait. Sorry, all those white kids got in. You don't get to go in. This was, I didn't know about this until a year ago, but the whole protestation against American Bandstand being whites only was another thing in the history of desegregation that only one thing that I've read in my lifetime has ever mentioned this Dick Clark American Bandstand thing. So skipping back a bit to the 20s and 30s, there was in those early days when there was more country music and hillbilly music, there was a band from Memphis called Gus Cannon's Jug Stompers. So probably all of you remember the Grateful Dead, because Dead and Company is still touring in 2022. And the Dead originally, before they became the Dead in late 64, they were Mother McCree's Uptown Jug champions. And the Dead in their repertoire did do some jug music from Gus Cannon's Jug Stompers. Last night as I was preparing for this, if you know the Dead, you know the song Sugaree, which Tedeschi Trucks Band and hundreds of bands do the song Sugaree. There was a song, there was another singer whose name I'm blanking at, but I mentioned it in the intro part to someone, and she did a song called Shake Sugaree. And so the lyrics are not the same, but Sugaree either meant someone who you found attractive. And so I think that because the Dead's writers were Americana historians, that they took Shake Sugaree by this woman whose name I'm blanking on, but she played the guitar left-handed and upside down like Hendrix.
Elizabeth Cotton.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Elizabeth Cotton, 10 points.
She was called Libba Cotton. That was her nickname, just an aside, and toured with Mike Seeger.
With Mike Seeger?
Yes.
You mean Pete Seeger?
No, his half-brother, Mike.
Oh, thank you very much.
She worked for the Seeger family as a housekeeper. They just said she played left-handed guitar and everything, and they wanted to promote her and encourage her music. And I actually saw them perform in, I guess, Oregon decades ago, that he was touring around with her. And I saw her a couple of times actually with Mike Seeger.
Thank you very much.
Some other stuff, but that's enough for now.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Let me, because I'm now looking at my list of things I've got on my screen, let me do a little bit of the Mississippi Rag, which is 1897, which definitely, as we know, predates blues, but just let's do a little bit of this. Not my style, but we'll just play a bit. No blues in it, to my ear. All right, enough of that. Now here's some Gus Cannon and his Jug Stompers, and let's see how that goes. All right, I didn't hear any jug music there, but there we go. So since I've been monologuing a bit, let me go to the next little bit here. So Alan Lomax ran around the country, I believe with his brother, recording blues musicians for the Library of Congress. And so here's an Alan Lomax recording of Lightning Washington and Some Prisoners. And let's go to that.
It's a too much morning. Out of my head, no. I went to the bottom. Good God Almighty.
then
With a
response.
6-pound diamond. Ah, my Lord, no. Saw the captain riding.
So there was a famous prison, which I don't know if it's still there, called Parchment Farm in I think it's Louisiana. And I know that Johnny Winter did a song about Parchment Farm, and a band called Cactus did. And if we Googled it, we would find many a reference to Parchment Farm. But it was an unpleasant place to be, like I'd imagine prison would be unpleasant. But this is again back to some of the 1933 early formative days of one of the many, many branches of blues music.
I'm sorry, Robert, can I just pop in with
Please.
something?
Please do.
Sugary was written by a longtime Grateful Dead lyricist, Robert Hunter, and composed by guitarist Jerry Garcia.
Yes.
Was it the other sugar? What was the other Sugary song?
Sugary by Elizabeth Cotton.
She
which I
wrote it?
listened to.
She played it.
She wrote it different,
Okay.
totally different lyrics. So
Yeah,
my guess is, and I did not have time last night at midnight when I came across Elizabeth Cotton to go to the Grateful Dead record, the archives at University of California, Santa Cruz, that has everything on everything and everybody's 2 cents opinion of, wait, I read this book from 1813 and it refers to Casey Jones. And yeah, so if you need
Okay,
more
it
than
says
enough.
that, yeah, the authorship is attributed to her. It doesn't say it was definite, but she had an album called that, recorded in February of '65, and Taj Mahal performed in an album for children.
Excellent.
Blues stuff for children. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. That's great. So Elizabeth, right, because if I was in the class listening, as I have been in my music classes that I take, I go, oh, let me look that up. Oh, no, it wasn't 61, it was 62. So thank you. All data graciously appreciated. So Elizabeth Cotton did Shake Sugaree. And so my thought is that the Dead's lyricists, being Americana music experts, heard that, left the lyrics behind, kept the Sugaree because it meant someone cute and attractive, and then made Shake It, Sugaree in the Dead song. That's my guess on the link.
Okay.
Okay, so now this thing we're looking at is 1933. So from 1926 to 1932, OK Records, spelled O-K-E-H, they were a major blues label and race records label. So between 1926 and 1932, OK, O-K-E-H, had its own brand of race records, and they were advertised as such. Around the days of pre-depression, so 1920s, country music by men started taking over from the more classy music of the women like Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, Ethel Waters, and it became more countrified, more dirty sounding. Like if you listen to Neil Young's guitar and it sounds really muddy, that's what I mean by dirty. Less refined and less, we're going to go to the fancy place to listen. So there were field recordings, Atlanta, Memphis, the Turpentine Camp pianos. One of the earliest stars was a guy named Papa Charlie Jackson, who was a banjo player. He did Black Snake Moan. So Black Snake Moan, there is a whole subdivision, which I hope one of you will choose as your thing to spend some time on, called Hokum Records, H-O-K-U-M, or Hokum Blues. Hokum refers to songs that are double entendre, sexual, nasty, erotic, play on words. There were, put your hot dog in my bun. And today, even 3 hours ago, in reading yet more stuff for the class, we are all familiar with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom because it was a play by August Wilson, and it's been around, since Ma Rainey was around. It never occurred to me that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom refers indeed to her own black bottom. Maybe you all knew that 15 years ago, but I didn't have that aha moment until about 3 hours prior to this minute. Any of you think did any of you know that it was about her black bottom by voice? Or, wow, that's new. Verbal feedback.
Never thought about it.
What did
News
you
to
think
me.
it was, Robert? I can't think of what else it could be.
Yeah, but
That's
I know,
what
I just, I never made the connection of, did you think it was about her butt?
Yes.
Okay.
What else could it be?
I just never went that far, you know, I just, okay, it's called the Black Bottom. I
Okay,
don't
good
know.
for you for admitting.
Anyway, so I'm just and naive and innocent. All right, so with this going back to the country lower brow, you know, guys raised in absolute poverty, not like Ma Rainey and her ilk were not raised in poverty too, but you got people like Blind Lemon Jefferson, and so parenthetically, so Cheech and Chong make reference to a guy named Blind Lemon Pie. So, no, Blind Lemon Chitlin. Sorry, I thought of Blind Lemon. I thought it was Blind Lemon Pie, and I did a Google search, and there's no reference to Blind Lemon Pie. So I get a prize for making a Google search, and nothing is found. But Blind Lemon Chitlin is the Cheech and Chong parody, obviously, of Blind Lemon Jefferson, who was one of the first, blues musicians. There was Blind Willie McTell. There was Peg Leg Howell, who got $50 for making his first record. And if you see the excellent reggae film, The Harder They Come with Jimmy Cliff, he is trying to sell his record to the white guy who runs the record company, and he's just getting screwed. Like, I'll give you like $20, kid, and that's all. Here's $20 and leave me alone. And he steals the rights. And we know that was totally common, Mr. Hilton. We know that was totally common for Black musicians to get screwed. And in fact, I think Muddy Waters had a bit of a row with the people at Chess Records, Sun or Chess, one or the other, about where are all my royalties, and that became a bit of a lawsuit later on. Anyway, and there was Skip James, and Skip James was playing in those days as well, and then he was rediscovered with many other people in the 1960s folk revival. And if you would like to cover the 1960s folk revival, when these guys already thought was dead, what happened to them, and they found them, in the various corners of the country, the blues revival and how that got people back would be, I think it's a fascinating topic. Okay, so then there was the Depression from like 1929 on, and ended, around by World War II, to just put it to wrap that up simply. So in the readings, rents went up during the Depression, 300% in Detroit, 35 cents a day was good money. 81% of the kids in Alabama were on forced vacation because there was no money to pay for schools. And and Black workers in the 30s were making $10 cents an hour, working 7 days a week. So 1933, Prohibition ended. 1935, Ricola jukeboxes were invented, and from jukeboxes we get juke joints. 1938 were the first electric guitar recordings, and so around 1940, Muddy Waters leaves in the Great Northern Migration, because he's the most famous exponent. So he leaves Mississippi Delta, takes the train up to Chicago, and meets some other musicians and starts playing. And because things are noisier, because it's not the country, things are noisy in Chicago, and so, as it were, electric blues, behold, is born. In 1938, there was the Carnegie Hall concert entitled From Spirituals to Swing, sponsored by John Hammond Sr. His son is quite the blues musician because he grew up, his father was friends with all these blues guys, so I've actually seen John Hammond Jr. The record industry is another entire topic unto itself, on the good and the bad, and local artists and ripping people off. And sometimes if you owned the record company, you would just put your name there as the author of the song, so you got songwriting royalties, even though you obviously had nothing at all to do with the song. Elvis Presley, one of his first big hits with Sun Records. Sun Records started in 1950. He did the song You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog, which was originally done by Big Mama Thornton, who also did Ball and Chain, that Janis Joplin did. And let me catch my breath. Well, let's just do so yes, when I was talking about Black Snake, clearly a reference to two. Anyway, we'll just go with Dopehead Blues. I'm going to make a mention here because I haven't stopped listening to music since I turned on the radio to Tobacco Road. So if we look here on your screen, these monkey men makes mama sore. Well, clearly she's talking about sex, but you might know the song Monkey Man by the Rolling Stones. I think it's from Beggar's Banquet. So I was reading about that and some commentary on what monkey man means. And it says, I'm glad I am a monkey man. I'm glad you are a monkey woman. So as a reference to having a monkey on your back means that you're a heroin addict. So reading more of many people commenting on that, it said that there is a mention of monkey man in a song that we're going to get to later by I think Pistol Slappin' Blues. So it's interesting how circuitous and intertwined lyrics are. So monkey men probably is referring to heroin addicts, to junkies, having sex with her and making mama sore. So let's go from here, and we'll just okay. Violently Blues. Yeah, I'm catching up with myself historically. Let's do a bit of Black Snake Blues.
It's not the GB Blues this time. It's the original Black Snake Blues. Thank you.
1963. Oh my God, with Sonny Boy Williamson. Stopping myself a second here. So we see here Sonny Boy Williamson, and there were two Sonny Boy Williamsons, Sonny Boy Williamson the first and the second. And they were both quite interesting. Sonny Boy Williamson 2, because there wasn't television, no one knew what they looked like. So Sonny Boy 2 learned the riffs of Sonny Boy 1 and then marketed himself as, hi, I'm Sonny Boy Williamson, but he wasn't, but he would play and he would get paid because no one knew what the other guy looked like. Lonnie Johnson. So Lonnie Johnson in the late 50s was in England because the British audience, again, citing things like the Yardbirds and even Blues Incorporated, which was like 1958 with Alexis Corner and Cyril Davies and the Graham Bond Organization. Three people very famous in England for being the roots of blues, but not really well known here. Cyril Davis, Alexis Corner, and Graham Bond. So people that became Led Zeppelin played with these guys, people that became Cream played with these guys. So you all know Lonnie Donegan's song, Does Your Chewing Gum Lose Its Flavor, on the Bedpost Overnight, and he also did Rock Island Line, so Lonnie Donegan became famous for this. So Lonnie Donegan's name his first name is not Lonnie, it was something else, but he backed Lonnie Johnson when Lonnie Johnson was playing in England in the late 50s, which gave rise to skiffle music, which the Beatles, before they were the Beatles, were a skiffle band. Oh my God, how convoluted and how murky is all this? So when Lonnie Donegan, when he wasn't named Lonnie, was backing Lonnie Johnson on guitar here, he said, wow, this guy's good. I, in homage to him, will steal his name and I'll become Lonnie Donegan. And then, Rock on the Line and Does Your Chewing Gum Lose Its Flavor on the Bedpost Overnight. Filmed in Baden-Baden, a very nice place. And so Sonny Boy on harmonica, so here we go. Somehow I feel I could do 300 hours on this. Let's jump forward to Viola Lee Blues, which the Grateful Dead did this song. Not that I'm a Deadhead, but just, in perusing stuff. Indeed, there is a lot I can talk about. Okay, we'll skip over Kokomo Arnold, who I did not know Kokomo Arnold till I was reading this book. And it's a good song. Yes, I should play some Kokomo Arnold, or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Yay. Yeah. So I never heard of this guy till I read the book. That Kokomo Arnold, who, you know, one of you mentioned in the beginning that there are a lot of names here, which is why I preferred the book over this book by Robert Palmer, not the Robert Palmer, the singer. This guy's more of a music historian, not the guy who did Sneaking Sally Through the Alley. But I find this book a little bit airier, and I wanted something denser if you're going to buy one book and have a reference before you start buying 20 other blues books. That's why I opted for that one. Okay, so Reverend Gary Davis, quite the guy. He did a lot of blues stuff, and I'm going to play two versions. So for those who live in the Boston area, on the MIT radio station, KMBR 88.1, the MIT radio station, every Sunday there's a guy, and I just discovered his program recently, every Sunday from noon till 2, he plays 2 hours of the same song, and it's called Ad Nauseum. But it's 2 hours of different versions of the same song. So there was a DJ on XM, on the Blues channel on XM years ago, 10, 15 years ago, who would do a 1 hour program of the same song in different versions. And because I'm a music fanatic, I found this fascinating. You might think not, but if you do, I recommend Sundays noon to 2. For 30 years, this guy's been doing the show with a different topic or song or theme, but literally it is the same song for 2 hours. And I take my hat off to him at his brilliance and dedication. So there are no shortage of versions of I Am the Light of the World, or even Viola Lee Blues, etc., which Google can help you find. But let's go listen to the original I Am the Light of the World, getting my fantasy fulfilled as I always wanted to be a DJ.
Excuse me, Robert, you said KMBR. I thought it was
Oh,
WMBR.
W, sorry, yes, here, this one.
Okay, checking, maybe there's two of
Yes,
them.
right, no, from California, so the K stuck with me, but there it, whatever it says there, WMBR. All right, so here we go with original. Thank you very much. That was the first time I played in full. What do y'all think?
Robert,
Yes.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
So he was an actual reverend doing the
I
devil's
believe
music.
so. I believe so.
Really?
So
He
were most
might
of
not
his
have been.
songs
Please go ahead.
were most of his songs like this about, Jesus and salvation and going to heaven, or that was just the one here?
No, some of them I know. Sorry to bring up the Grateful Dead again, but the Dead do several of his songs. Keep Your Love Light Trimmed and Burning. And Nina, you might know another one, or someone else.
Did he do the Cocaine Blues?
Oh, he did Samson and Delilah. I
Oh.
don't know that he did Cocaine Blues. As a preacher, probably wouldn't have been number one. But yeah, he wrote Samson and Delilah. And so if someone wants to quickly Wikipedia or discography him, he did lots of stuff. So now I'm going to play in the format of 2 hours of the same song, but not 2 hours of the same song, the version by Jorma Kaukonen. So Jorma Kaukonen, you may or may not know, was the guitarist of the Jefferson Airplane and Jefferson Starship and Jefferson whatever else they became, and is now touring with the bassist from 1966 and beyond of the Jefferson Airplane, Jack Cassidy. They're still touring together, and this is now 2022. I actually saw Jorma and Jack. They were on a music cruise I was on about 2 years ago, and I actually talked with Jorma for a few minutes, and I asked him, why are people not taking to the streets in revolution? And he wasn't sure. But that was my 2 minutes with Jorma. So here we're going to do a bit of his version of Reverend Gary Davis's I Am Light of the World.
I'd like to do one of my favorite Davis songs. Of course, all the songs I can play of his are my favorite. I wish I wrote each and every one of them.
Same song, different artist.
Just as long as I'm in this world, I'm the light of this world. Just as long as I'm in this world, well, I am the light of this world. Just as long as I'm in this world, I'm the light of this world. Just as long as I'm in this world, I'm the light of this world. Well, you don't believe in Jesus, Lord, and not a word he said. When he come all the way down from Lazarus' grave, raise him from the dead. Just as long as I'm the light of this world. Just as long as I'm in this world, I'm the light of this world. We got fiery fingers, Lord, and I said we got fiery hands. Get up in the heaven, play in the fiery band. Just as long as I'm in this world, I'm the light of this world. Just as long as I'm in this world, I'm the light of this world.
Turn the volume down to a slow, gentle fade out, I would, but I don't know how to do a slow, gentle fade out.
We'll shout out over the water, Lord, I said, we won't be there long. Souls anchored in Jesus, no, ain't gonna do me no harm, just as long as I'm in.
Great version, Yorma. Comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
I understand that musical genres are blurred and the boundaries are not really clear, but this one makes me think that doesn't sound to me bluesy. It sounds more folky. So I'm wondering for you, Robert, what's kind of the defining characteristic of what makes a piece of music the blues?
Thank you. It's cloudy. And for all of the love I have for music and the literally thousands of concerts I've seen of countless genres, from jam bands to whatever, I don't play music. So even though I can read and I can say something like it's a 8 or 12 or even 12.5 bar blues progression with literally augmented first, fourths, and fifths, and flattened third and seventh.
And I wouldn't know what that meant either.
Don't know what
so-
it means. Thank you. But at least I said it for the record for the class. I don't know what it means, but that's what the blues is. And I do plan on having guest speakers for the class, just so you know. I am reaching out to people I know, like one guy runs the blues festival in Vegas, and guitarists I know locally, and other people to add to our mix here to make it even more fascinating than it already shall be. So there is a border, like someone said, well, is Billie Holiday blues or jazz? And so yes, or depends what day, or depends what song. In the 10s, 20s, 30s, musicians could play different styles, just like anybody today who's good can play, a number of different styles. So there's a blurring, and that's the best answer. If it, I certainly understand how this sounds folk or country, because it's one guy with this, but hopefully we'll get to Son House doing one of my favorite songs, Death Letter. And there's no way to mistake that what Son House is doing is blues.
Right.
Part of it is that like here Jorma is singing crisp and he's obviously being recorded for a movie. So this isn't as painful a version of rendering up to Jesus as Reverend Gary Davis did. And if someone wants to see if Reverend Gary Davis was a real reverend, go right ahead. So that was
My
Jorma. Yeah.
My recollection from the reading is that he is a reverend, and I think I have the order right. He was doing the blues and then moved away from doing the blues and did more spiritual singing. It's somewhere in the first, I don't know, the index will say where that is, but it was fuzzy recollection.
And of course, Wikipedia, is an excellent source for things. And Wikipedia is edited. It's not just somebody jabbering, it's researched. All right, so here, so let me do a little bit, let me catch up a little bit, and thanks to everybody. I see there's a comment in the chat, but I don't want to lose my screen or things, so I'm not looking at the chat. So let me just move up a little bit. So in 1949, RCA created the 45 RPM record, the 7-inch two-sided disc that we know. In 1954, out of Cleveland, Alan Freed was doing a rock and roll show. Blues music was continuing. In 1963, Motown Records started, and Motown had its first hit in 63, as did Otis Redding. 1964, the Beatles came to America after playing skiffle bands in the red light district in Germany and in Hamburg, I believe, and being from Liverpool. And they played some blues, like Matchbox was a blues song, or maybe R&B, but in that, again, it's fuzzy, but in that genre. And so 64 also, Tobacco Road by the Nashville Teens. And the Stones were starting in 63 also in England, going through the people again like Cyril Davies and forgot the other guy's name, Cyril Davies and the other guy that See Above. And so with the Stones in 1965 came to America, and they played a TV music program called Shindig that I'm sure all of you will remember, because I remember Shindig. And the Stones said, because they were famous in 65 versus unknown in 62, and they said, well, we're not going to play on Shindig unless you also air Howlin' Wolf. And so in order to get the Stones, they got their mentor, Howlin' Wolf, to be on Shindig as well. So I saw Howlin' Wolf in 1972 at the Hollywood Palladium. He was opening for Alice Cooper. And I knew enough about music that I knew that I was seeing a legend by seeing Howlin' Wolf in 1972. I don't remember what he played, but I remember being in awe. So descriptions I've heard about Howlin' Wolf is he's like 6'6", and clearly one description said that his hands were like a full ham. So this was one giant, intimidating man. There's an interesting Stones story. When they went to Chess Records in Chicago, they were already known at this time, because they already put out like King Bee and a couple other songs, which were blues and R&B. So they go to Chess Records, and they know they're the Stones, and they're getting their stuff out of the car, and some black guys come out to help them, and a guy comes out in overalls, paint splattered overalls, to give him a hand. And Keith Richards, the guitarist for the Rolling Stones, looks at him and goes like, "It's Muddy Waters." Muddy Waters, who wrote the song Rolling Stone. So Muddy Waters in 1950, I believe, 52, wrote Rolling Stone. This gave birth to the name of the magazine Rolling Stone directly, and gave birth to the name of the band, the Rolling Stones. And so here come the Stones, Chess Records, where all the music, a lot of the music they listened to came from. And who's helping? Who's this guy in the splattered overalls? It's Muddy Waters carrying their equipment out of the van. So that's an oft-told story. So 65, we have the Yardbirds, we have John Mayall's Blues Breakers. So on John Mayall's Blues Breakers in England, the guitarists he had in his band included Peter Green, who went to start Fleetwood Mac, and it's Fleetwood Mac because there's Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, so that became Fleetwood Mac. We're going to play Peter Green in a minute. I'm sure you all know the song Black Magic Woman by Santana. That was written by Peter Green. So was Green Manalishi, but they don't know Green Manalishi, but you do know Black Magic Woman. So that begat the 60s and the British invasion, which please someone cover. There is an infinity of stuff because we all grew up with the British invasion of the Stones and the Yardbirds and the Who, playing Young Man Blues on Live at Leeds. And at least my head is just full of remembering the 60s British invasion. And then there was Hendrix was a blues musician who also was raised in abject poverty. And Hendrix died in 1970. I was thinking that this morning, that I can't believe that, for the 4 years that Hendrix was alive and recording, what an influence, and still voted like the best rock guitarist ever. It's just fascinating. So that from here, and I'm trying to wrap myself up a little bit, we can progress from the British blues invasion of the 60s into the 70s. Cream, Led Zeppelin 1. Led Zeppelin 1 was a blues album, and on at least one of the songs on Led Zeppelin 1, they're taking from Muddy Waters, they're taking from Robert Johnson, and they're not crediting any songwriter. So there was a lawsuit against Led Zeppelin, and they lost. So the first printings just said, like, lyrics by, the people in Led Zeppelin, and later on it had to attribute things to perhaps Willie Dixon, Muddy Waters, and other artists. 2003 in the US, the Congress, you remember Congress, who can't agree? Well, they agreed in 2003, the old days, that it was the year of the blues. I have been on a number of blues cruises, like I said. I was saying that every time I'd go on one, somebody would die. I went and saw Bobby Blue Bland, he died. Saw Honey Boy Edwards, he died. Saw a younger singer from Oakland, she died. Michael Burke was a great guy, he died. So much for that. And there's the Big Blues Bender in Las Vegas. Hi, AJ. And I've been to the Blues Bender several times, where obviously current and living people like Mr. Sip and Tab Benoit plays, and what's his name? Buddy Guy. Buddy Guy, who's been playing since the late 50s, has also played about 3-4 years ago, played at the Big Blues Bender in Vegas. And I recommend it to you, particularly once COVID disappears, which is why I haven't gone the last 2 years. So that brings us to newer people like the Tedeschi Trucks Band, and no shortage of blues. So any comments? Otherwise, I'd like to play a Peter Green song, or at least part of it. Any comments at this point? Okay, a little bit of Peter Green's I've Got a Mind to Give Up Living and Go Shopping Instead. I'm not going to play all of it, but Go Home and Cry. This is such a great song. The next one is sadder. Let's do a bit of this.
I've got a good mind to give up living.
Oh, God.
And go shopping instead.
Every note.
I've got a good mind to give up living. And go shopping instead.
It's so painfully beautiful. This is
Pick out myself a tombstone. Yes, and have myself pronounced dead. Now when I read your letter this morning, that was on your place in bed. I
Baby, when I raise